Imagine yourself sitting by a small lamp, its light soft as a breath, while outside the night air carries the scent of salt and sea. You know the story you are about to hear is often told with thunder and fury of great ships clashing, of storms breaking wood and sail. But tonight we will tell it differently. We will drift slowly, as if upon calm waters, letting the Armada unfold not as a roar but as a whisper. Stay with me, because the twist is this. The Armada's tale is not only about battles on open seas. It is also about kitchens ashore, preparing bread, about sailors missing their families, about ink scratched on parchment in dimly lit chambers. It is about everyday lives caught in the tide of history. And that makes it more human, more tender, more real. So instead of cannons, we will listen for the creak of timbers, the rustle of sails, the hush of prayers whispered before sleep. We will move gently between decks, harbors, and hearths, hearing the Armada as its sailors and families might have felt it. As you breathe slowly, let curiosity guide you. Tonight, you will not just hear about a fleet. You will step softly inside its world, safe and unhurried. And in a moment, I will take you to the very beginning, when the idea of an armada was first born. The story of the Armada begins not on the sea, but on land, in quiet rooms where plans were first imagined. To understand how a fleet of over 100 ships came to set sail toward England, we must first step into the chambers of King Philip II of Spain, and even more softly into the world that shaped him. Picture a chamber in the Escorial, the great stone palace outside Madrid. The air inside is cool, touched with the scent of wax and stone. Tapestries hang heavy on the walls, their threads dim in the candlelight. At a carved table sits Philip, his face lined with care, his eyes steady and inward-looking. The hour is late, yet he leans over papers, letters, reports, each one bearing news of politics, faith, and war. He does not rush. His motions are deliberate, measured. He has learned patience, and he trusts in time as much as in power. Stay with me, because here lies the gentle twist. The Armada was not, at its heart, simply a military decision. It was a story of faith as Philip saw it. He believed he was chosen to defend the Catholic world, to preserve unity of faith where he thought it threatened. The Protestant Queen of England, Elizabeth, stood as a challenge to that vision, and her support of rebels in the Netherlands deepened his resolve. Yet within these large ideas, there were also small details. Merchants worried about disrupted trade, fishermen fearing English privateers, and scribes carefully copying out orders by lamplight. The Armada's beginning was therefore woven from both grand and ordinary threads. Sailors signed contracts, shipbuilders hammered planks, merchants discussed costs over bread and wine. Each life touched by the decision added weight to the Armada's story. Even those far from Spain felt its ripple, for in England rumours grew, and in small parishes prayers were spoken for safety. Imagine the shipyards of Lisbon and Seville, the air filled with the scent of pitch and oak, the ring of hammers on nails, the murmur of voices raised in prayer before masts. Ships rose slowly from wood and rope, their ribs like skeletons of whales, their hulls tarred black against sea and time. Workers knew their craft well, yet they also knew that storms, more than men, would test their work. As boards were fitted, sails sewn, and anchors forged, the Armada slowly took shape not in a single moment, but in thousands of daily tasks. Stay with me, because in a moment we'll turn to England, and you'll see how across the Channel life felt the same currents. In Elizabeth's court, Decisions were also made by candlelight. Her advisors leaning over maps of coasts, their voices low but urgent. And yet beyond those walls, ordinary people carried on. Brewers stirred ale. Children played in muddy streets. Women gathered rushes to sweeten rooms. The high tide of history always reached the shore of everyday life. Philip's plan was shaped by more than religion. Trade with the New World, the defense of Spain's treasure fleets, the sting of English raids, these all pressed upon him. But he did not decide quickly. He moved as the Armada itself would later move. Vast, deliberate, difficult to turn once set in motion. And as he wrote letters and considered prayers, the Armada became less an idea and more a destiny. By the end of these quiet beginnings, no one yet knew how many lives would be bound into the Armada's fate. But the first steps had been taken, the first timbers cut, the first prayers whispered. And so, the Armada did not begin with battle. It began with silence, with intention, with the soft scratching of pens and the steady hammering of carpenters. So now, as you breathe more slowly, imagine the stillness of that chamber in Spain, the quiet of the shipyards, the murmur of prayers drifting up. The Armada is only just beginning, and you are safe, watching it unfold from the gentle distance of history. In the next chapter, we will move closer to the shores of England, where word of this vast endeavor begins to spread. The whispers of the Armada did not remain in Spain for long. Across the narrow channel in England, rumors carried on salt air and on the lips of travelers. Some came through merchants in Antwerp, others through sailors returning from foreign ports, and still more from the watchful eyes of Elizabeth's own network of spies. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how information itself became a battlefield, as crucial as swords or ships, and how the first true defense of England was not a cannon, but a whisper. Picture the court of Elizabeth I. In 1586, the Queen moves through a hall hung with tapestries, her dress shimmering in candlelight, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and rosewater. Around her gather advisors, Francis Walsingham, with his sharp eyes and endless patience for secrets, William Cecil, older, cautious, weighing each word before it leaves his lips. Maps are spread, pins marking coasts, notes scribbled in margins. Yet for all their careful planning, what they most crave is knowledge. When would Spain move? How many ships? What allies might stand with them? The Armada itself is still only forming, but the idea of it already presses like a storm cloud over England, and here lies the gentle twist. Though we think of the Armada as a tale of ships, its first battles were fought with ink and rumour. Walsingham's agents moved quietly across Europe, slipping letters into couriers' hands, meeting in taverns by candlelight, exchanging words in code. News from Spain did not travel quickly, yet it carried enormous weight. A single detail, 10 ships ready, 20 delayed, a new commander named could change the mood of a kingdom. The Armada's sails had not yet left Spain, yet already they cast a shadow across England's shore. Ordinary people, too, began to sense the tension. In London's markets, merchants grumbled about Spanish goods, worried about disruption to trade. Fishermen along the coast looked out toward the horizon with unease, wondering if warships might one day appear where they usually saw only gulls. In small parish churches, prayers for safety were added to familiar psalms. The fear was not constant, it ebbed and flowed, like the tide, but it was present, seeping quietly into daily life. Stay with me, B, 'cause one of the most curious truths is that even as fear grew, so did a sense of resilience. Elizabeth's presence was powerful. She did not cower at the news of Spain's preparations. Instead, she appeared in court with steady calm, her words chosen to reassure as much as to command. Her people saw not only their queen, but a symbol of their unity. Even those who doubted the strength of England's navy began to believe that somehow, with her at the helm, the nation would endure. While courtiers and spies traced the Armada's movements, preparations at home began slowly. Shipwrights were summoned, stores of timber inspected, sails mended, ropes coiled. Harbours that usually hummed with trade began to shift toward defence. In Portsmouth and Plymouth, quiet urgency grew. But these were not sudden bursts of panic. They were deliberate steps, taken with the steady knowledge that months, even years, might pass before the Armada truly arrived. The waiting itself became its own kind of burden. And here's something tender. Waiting can be harder than action. To rise each day knowing that across the sea, men built ships intended for your shores, while you still gathered food and fetched water, was to live with a quiet shadow in the heart. Yet, in that shadow, daily life persisted. Weddings were celebrated, children were born, fields were sown, markets filled. History's tide was vast, but each person still moved within their own small current. The Armada's approach, then, was not sudden thunder, but slow rumble, heard long before the storm arrived. In Elizabeth's England, each whisper of news was like the tolling of a bell, distant but steady, reminding all that a moment of reckoning was drawing near. Yet as night fell and candles burned low, the kingdom settled into sleep with prayers on their lips and faith in the dawn. So now, breathe gently and imagine that quiet England, its narrow streets, its candle-lit maps, its restless but hopeful hearts. The Armada is still across the sea, but its presence is already here, in whispers and in waiting. And in the next chapter, we will step aboard the Spanish ships themselves, to hear the thoughts of those who would one day sail into history. Now, let us turn from England back to Spain, to the harbours where ships took shape and sailors prepared for journeys that few had ever imagined. The Armada was not merely an idea anymore, it was wood and rope, sail and anchor, sweat and prayer. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how these great ships were not only machines of war, but floating homes, carrying the ordinary lives of thousands across an uncertain sea. Picture the harbour of Lisbon. Dawn rises pale, mist drifting low over the water. Great hulls loom like shadows, their masts reaching upward as if to touch the sky. Workers move steadily along the docks, coopers rolling barrels, blacksmiths striking sparks from iron, women carrying baskets of bread for crews. The air is filled with sound, the creak of rope, the cry of gulls, the low murmur of prayers. For to set sail on such a voyage was not simply labour, it was a leap of faith. Each ship was a world unto itself. The galleons, proud and tall, carried heavy guns and rich ornament, but alongside them sailed smaller vessel supply ships, caravels, hulks filled with food, water, ammunition. A fleet is not only warriors, it is bakers, carpenters, surgeons, priests, all bound together on the water. Men signed contracts that promised pay, though many knew it might never come. They packed small bundles of belongings, a rosary, a scrap of cloth from home, a knife, a letter folded and worn. Each sailor carried his own story onto the deck, and here lies the gentle twist. Though the Armada was planned as a grand enterprise, Most men aboard thought less of politics than of survival. They wondered about storms, about sickness, about the taste of water after weeks in barrels. They thought of families left behind, of wives and children waiting at village hearths. The Armada may have been Philip's vision, but for its sailors it was a test of endurance and of faith. Life aboard began even before departure. Crews learned the rhythm of watches, for hours on duty, for hours off. They practiced with ropes, hauled sails, cleaned decks. Priests led prayers, urging the men to see themselves as soldiers of God, chosen for a holy cause. At night, by lantern glow, voices lifted in hymns, soft and steady, carrying across the still water. Stay with me, be, 'cause one detail is especially telling. Food was prepared and stored in vast quantities. Salted fish, dried beans, hard biscuits. Barrels of water and wine lined the holds. Yet everyone knew that supplies could sour, water could spoil, meat could rot. The greatest enemy was often not England, but hunger, thirst, and disease. And so sailors whispered prayers, not only for victory, but for endurance. Commanders, too, walked the decks, their boots striking firmly, their gazes steady. They spoke of duty, of honor, of Spain's greatness, yet even they felt the weight of uncertainty. For the sea is no respecter of crowns, and storms care little for kings. Each officer knew this, even as they steeled themselves to lead Dot at night, when work slowed and stars brightened overhead. Sailors leaned on rails and spoke softly of home. They told stories of villages in Castile, of vineyards in Andalusia, of olive groves shimmering in sun. The sea stretched wide and silent, yet in their words the land was near, the hearth still warm in memory. And in that remembering, courage was quietly found. So now, as you breathe with me, imagine standing on one of those decks. The timbers creak beneath your feet, the salt air brushes your face, a lantern sways above, casting a small circle of light. Around you, men settle into hammocks, voices fading into murmurs, the ship itself sighing as it rests against the tide. The Armada is gathering strength, but tonight, it is only a floating village of souls, bound together in waiting in the next chapter. We will follow them as the first sails rise, and the Armada begins its slow, fateful journey north. The day came when anchors lifted, when sails unfurled like wings, and when the Armada finally began its long, deliberate journey. It was not a sudden leap into battle, but a slow rising like a tide. Ships that had rested in harbors for months, even years, now stirred awake. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see that this moment often told with fanfare and drama was. For those aboard, a mixture of awe, fear, and the quiet ordinariness of work. Imagine standing on a quay in Lisbon. The harbor swells with movement. Gulls cry above. The smell of tar and salt fills the air. Great galleons shift slowly, their sails taut with morning breeze. Men heave at ropes, the creak of wood blending with the splash of water. The Armada is not yet a roaring beast, it is a chorus of human effort, each voice, each hand adding to the motion. On shore, families gather. Wives clutch children, mothers press rosaries into sons' hands, fathers clasp shoulders with silent pride. Words of farewell are whispered, some hopeful, some broken. Few know if they will meet again. And yet, beneath the sorrow, there is a current of faith that God will protect, that Spain's cause is righteous, that the Armada's mission is more than war, And here lies the gentle twist. Even in departure, uncertainty clung close. The Armada was vast, over 100 ships strong, yet its coordination was fragile. Winds could scatter, supplies could spoil, orders could falter. Philip's vision was steady, but the sea was not. Each sailor felt both the pride of a mighty fleet and the fragility of their own small place within it. As the ships slid from the harbour, Lisbon itself seemed to sigh. The city had lived with their presence, their masts looming like forests, their crews filling taverns with songs. Now the harbour grew emptier, quieter, as the Armada drifted outward. For Spain, it was both triumph and sacrifice, a sending forth of treasure, of men, of hope. Stay with me because life aboard, once at sea, shifted into rhythm. Watches were kept, for hours on, for hours off. The bell told the passing of time. Water sloshed in barrels, hammocks swayed. Men mended sails, scrubbed decks, prayed at dawn and dusk. The ships were no longer waiting. They were moving, and movement itself was a kind of reassurance. Yet each day brought its small tests, a rope fraying, a barrel leaking, a man falling ill. The Armada, though mighty, was made fragile by such details. Evenings were the gentlest moments. Lanterns swayed in the rigging, stars scattered overhead, the sea lapped steadily against the hulls. Men sang soft songs, their voices blending with the wind. Stories of home were told in whispers, laughter sparked even in fear. In those hours, the Armada seemed less an army and more a community, villages afloat, bound together by wood and will. And here's something tender. The sea itself became companion. Its colors shifted, each day blue, gray, green, silver. Its moods were endless, calm as glass, restless as breath, wild as thunder. Sailors spoke to it, cursed it, prayed to it, yet they also loved it. For all its danger, it was also their path, their livelihood, their story. The Armada could not exist without the sea's embrace, and so they learned to move gently with its rhythm. As the fleet stretched into open water, the sight was breathtaking. A forest of masts against horizon, sails billowing like clouds, flags fluttering in sun. It was a floating city, its scale unmatched in Europe. From shore, it looked invincible. From within, it felt vast but vulnerable. Both truths were real. So now, as you breathe more slowly, imagine watching that fleet slip into distance. Picture the sound of oars and sails, the smell of salt, the hush of farewells fading. The Armada has begun its journey, and in the next chapter, we will follow it north, through seas both calm and testing, where wind and weather begin to speak as loudly as kings. Once at sea, the Armada's true character revealed itself not in battle, but in the slow days of sailing north. To guide so many ships together was an art, and each day tested the patience and skill of captains and crews alike. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how the Armada was not simply a fleet moving through water, but a fragile tapestry of lives, bound together by wind, discipline, and hope. The fleet moved slowly, no faster than its slowest vessel. Galleons might strain ahead, their sails eager, but they had to wait for supply ships, for smaller craft heavy with barrels of water, sacks of grain, kegs of wine. Each ship carried part of the Armada's survival, and so none could be left behind. The Armada was a single body, and like any body, it was only as strong as its weakest part. Days at sea blurred into one another. The bell tolled. Meals were served hardtack softened in broth, salted meat chewed slowly, wine poured sparingly. Water was rationed, for every drop mattered. Men worked in shifts, coiling ropes, mending sails, swabbing decks. Priests held prayers, reminding the fleet that they sailed not only for Spain, but for God. Hymns rose at sunset, mingling with the cries of gulls and the sigh of waves. And here lies the gentle twist. Though the Armada was mighty, sickness moved among the men more swiftly than any enemy. Stomachs soured from bad water. Fevers rose in the close air of holds. Coughs spread through hammocks. A ship was both sanctuary and snare, its closeness comforting and confining all at once. Yet in this, two men found strength. They cared for one another, whispered reassurances, shared what little comfort they had. The Armada's survival depended as much on compassion as on discipline. Stay with me because storms too spoke their part. Winds shifted suddenly, scattering sails, driving ships off course. Rain lashed decks, waves rose, masts groaned. Yet just as quickly, calm returned. The sea was not constant. It was a teacher, reminding the fleet of its fragility. To sail north was to surrender daily to forces beyond command. The Armada was strong, but the sea was stronger still. Even in hardship, there were moments of beauty. At dawn, the horizon glowed rose and gold, sails gleaming against the light. At night, stars burned bright, the Milky Way arcing overhead. Sailors leaned on rails, their hearts heavy with longing, yet their eyes filled with wonder. To see such skies, such seas, was to glimpse eternity. Even in the midst of uncertainty, commanders worked constantly, signaling with flags and lanterns, striving to keep the fleet together. Discipline was strict, yet not cruel. Men knew the stakes. To falter was to fail not only Spain, but their families, their faith. The Armada was a mission larger than themselves, and that belief carried them through long, weary days. And here's something tender. Even enemies at sea shared kinship. English fishermen sometimes glimpsed the Armada far off, sails like clouds against horizon. They whispered prayers, hurried home, yet some also felt awe. For all the fear it inspired, the Armada was also a marvel, a living wonder of human craft and ambition. So now as you breathe gently, imagine standing on deck in evening calm. The sails ripple softly, the lantern sways, the sea whispers against the hull. Around you, men murmur prayers, their voices blending with the night. The Armada sails on, not yet toward battle, but into the long unfolding of destiny. And in the next chapter, we will follow the fleet as England at last begins to see it approach, and the quiet waiting gives way to gathering resolve. The Armada moved northward, sails swelling like clouds, its vast body stretching across the horizon. For many aboard, the days were long, yet full of tasks that kept their minds from wandering too far into fear. Still, every man knew the purpose of their journey to meet England face to face. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see that before the Armada ever reached its enemy, it encountered trials of a different kind, storms, shortages, and the endless patience demanded by the sea itself. The first storms came suddenly, as they often do. A day might dawn calm, the sea silver and smooth, but by afternoon winds gathered. Clouds thickened, and rain swept down in sheets. Masts groaned, sails snapped, decks turned slick beneath boots. Men hauled ropes with hands blistered and raw, voices straining to be heard above the roar of wind. The sea lifted the ships like toys, heaving them skyward before plunging them down again. Yet amid the chaos, there was rhythm. Bells still told the hours, orders still rang, prayers still rose from the lips of sailors clinging to faith. And here lies the gentle twist. Storms did not always destroy. They also revealed. A weak plank gave way, a frayed rope snapped, a leaking barrel soured. These flaws, hidden in calm, emerged in fury. In this way, the sea itself tested the Armada, finding weakness long before England could. Repairs were constant, men working with knives and hammers, tar and pitch, patching, binding, sewing. The fleet pressed on, though each storm left scars not only on wood but on spirit. The storms also delayed them. Days lost to weather meant supplies ran lower, water grew stale, bread harder, wine more sour. Hunger gnawed at bellies, thirst thickened tongues. Yet still the men endured. They told stories in the dark, sang hymns at dawn, mended sails with needle and palm. Each man knew his hardship was shared, that he was not alone, that the fleet itself was like a great family bound together on the water. Stay with me because the truth is tender. Even in storms, there were moments of quiet beauty. Lightning flickered across waves, illuminating sails like ghostly wings. Rain softened faces, washing away sweat and salt. When storms passed, skies cleared into brilliance, stars burning overhead like lanterns hung by unseen hands. Sailors leaned on rails, eyes wide, hearts both weary and comforted. For every terror, the sea gave back wonder. By the time the Armada reached the Bay of Biscay, its men had learned patience. They knew their task was not swift battle, but endurance. To sail north was to submit daily to the mercy of wind and wave, to let go of control and trust in the fleet's strength. Some began to believe the storms themselves were omens, tests from God, warnings or blessings, depending on the heart. Priests reassured them that faith would prevail, that no storm was greater than divine will at night. Hammocks swayed gently in calmer seas, the creak of timbers steady as breath. The men slept close, shoulder to shoulder, comforted by nearness. Dreams came of home, olive groves shimmering in sunlight, vineyards heavy with grapes, narrow village streets alive with laughter. Some awoke with tears on their cheeks, yet in those dreams they found strength to rise again, to face another day. So now, as you breathe slowly, imagine yourself among them. The deck beneath you is damp from rain, the air still heavy with salt. Around you, lanterns glow, voices murmur prayers. You are not alone. You are part of something vast, a fleet moving not only toward England, but toward destiny itself. In the next chapter, we will leave the storms behind and glimpse England at last, where watchers on the cliffs see sails on the horizon and wonder what fate approaches their shore. Far to the north, along the cliffs of Cornwall and Devon, the people of England began to see signs of what they had long feared. Dark shapes on the horizon, sails glinting in the sunlight, the sea itself dotted with shadows. At first, it was rumor fishermen whispering of ships glimpsed far out, merchants carrying tales from ports. But then came certainty. The Armada was near. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how this first sight was not thunder or fire, but silence, awe, and the hush of realization that history had arrived. Picture a morning on the English coast. The sea lies calm, gulls wheel overhead, and villagers walk the shore, gathering driftwood, mending nets. A child looks out to sea and points, calling others to follow his gaze. At first it seems only clouds. Then the shapes sharpen, masts, sails, hulls moving slowly, steadily, like a forest drifting across the water. Voices rise, not in panic, but in wonder, for never before had such a sight filled these waters. Messengers hurry inland. Riders gallop to towns, to London, to Elizabeth's court. Bells ring, summoning men to prepare, summoning women to prayer. The Armada has not yet fired a shot, yet already it has changed the land it approaches. England knows it is no longer waiting. The storm across the sea has arrived at its shore, and here lies the gentle twist. Though fear stirred, so too did resolve. Ordinary villagers, who yesterday spoke only of crops or weather, now speak of defense, of faith, of queen. Men gather weapons, however simple, pikes, bows, muskets, if they can find them. Women prepare food, bandages, prayers. Even children feel the weight of the moment, listening to whispers at night, hearing their parents' voices, hushed but steady. The Armada's arrival was not only a challenge to England's leaders, was a call to every hearth in Plymouth Harbour. Ships of Elizabeth's navy rocked gently, their captains readying crews. Among them, Sir Francis Drake, calm and deliberate, his voice carrying assurance. Legend says he was playing bowls when news arrived of the Armada's sighting. Whether the tale is true or not, its spirit captures the moment. Calm in the face of fear, steadiness amid storm. For Drake and his men, the Armada was not a giant to dread, but a test to meet with cunning and patience. Stay with me, Bee, 'cause here is where the rhythm of the two worlds begins to meet. On one side, the Spanish Armada, vast and solemn, moving like a cathedral upon the sea. On the other, the English fleet, smaller, swifter, each ship built to dart and dance. The difference was not only in size, but in spirit. Spain moved as one body, slow but steady. England prepared to move as many, each quick, flexible, responsive. Both sides believed themselves chosen. Both sides believed the sea and God would be theirs. But before battle, there was waiting. England's coast braced itself. Fires were stacked high on hillsides, ready to be lit as beacons to warn of danger. Men gathered at musters, women brought supplies, parishes prayed, and yet daily life continued. Markets still opened, bread still baked, bells still rang for weddings and funerals. The Armada was immense, but even its shadow could not erase the rhythm of life. And here's something tender. For many who first glimpsed the Armada, what they remembered most was not fear, but beauty. The sight of sails billowing against horizon, sunlight catching on rigging, flags fluttering in wind. Even as they prayed for protection, they marveled at the vision. To see such a fleet was to see something larger than life, a moment to carry forever in memory. So now, as you breathe gently, imagine standing on those cliffs, the sea wind brushing your face, the smell of salt sharp in the air. Far off, sails gleam like wings, moving slowly, steadily closer. You do not yet hear cannon or cry, only the hush of waves, the murmur of voices, the beating of your own heart. The Armada is here, and the world holds its breath. In the next chapter, we will move closer still, as the first cautious dances between fleets begin, and the story turns from waiting to meeting. The Armada, after so many weeks at sea, at last lay close enough for England to see it, not as rumour or distant shadow, but as a living presence. The coastline stirred with watchful eyes, and harbours with restless ships. Yet the Armada's commanders did not come with haste or fury. They moved with solemn purpose, seeking to anchor near Calais, to gather, to wait for the promised link with Parma's forces. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how this waiting, this pause before battle, became as important to the story as the clash itself, and how time itself fought alongside wind and wave. Imagine the Armada lying offshore, its great hulls rolling gently in the swell. Lanterns flicker at dusk, sails hang slack in still air. Men lean on rails, gazing toward the English coast. They know their orders. Hold position, wait for Parma, protect the transports that would carry soldiers across the channel. Yet each day of waiting is also a risk. Supplies dwindle, sickness spreads, storms threaten. A fleet cannot remain still forever. The sea itself demands movement. On the English side, fires blaze on high hills, their flames racing like messages through the night. Villagers see the beacons and whisper prayers. Soldiers see them and march. Captains see them and ready sails. The whole of England becomes a single body, alert, alive, watching the horizon. Yet there is still no battle, only the steady hush of waiting, and here lies the gentle twist. It was not always cannon that shaped the Armada's fate, but silence. While Spain waited for Parma soldiers, England prepared with every hour. Drake and Howard, commanding the navy, gathered ships, repaired rigging, filled powder horns. Couriers rushed to Elizabeth, carrying updates. The delay, meant to strengthen Spain, slowly turned against it. Waiting, so natural on land, became dangerous at sea. Stay with me, Bee, 'cause this quiet tension is the kind that lulls and intrigues. Picture men aboard the Spanish galleons. They mend sails, clean muskets, pray aloud. Some dream of swift battle and victory. Others think only of home, longing for a hearth, for bread fresh from an oven, for voices of wives and children. The Armada carries not only warriors, but dreamers, doubters, weary hearts. Each soul waits, each soul feels the weight of days. On shore in England, life presses on, even as fear lingers. Children chase geese in fields, women bake bread, bells ring for weddings. Yet beneath it all runs a current of awareness. The Armada waits out there, like a storm cloud just beyond the hill. Farmers glance skyward more often, fishermen sail closer to shore, church services swell with voices pleading for protection. The waiting itself knits the people together, uniting them in both dread and faith. And here's something tender. Sometimes, the ships of both sides glimpsed one another. Sails shining in sun, flags waving in breeze. No cannon fired, no chase began. They simply looked, each at the other, each knowing the time would come soon. It was like two chess players sitting long before the first move, studying, breathing, waiting. The sea between them was not empty. It was charged with silence at night. The Armada's men slept to the sound of water lapping at hulls, timbers creaking softly, hammocks swaying. In those moments, they felt small, each life a single thread in a vast tapestry. Some prayed for victory, some for survival, some only for peace. Stars glittered above, reminding them of eternity, of how brief their voyage truly was. So now, as you breathe with me, imagine standing at the rail of a galleon at anchor. The air is still, the lantern sways, the coast lies dark in the distance. You are waiting, as all around you wait. The sea holds its breath, and so do you. And in the next chapter, we will see how that waiting breaks, how fire itself will be loosed upon the Armada, scattering stillness into flame and chaos. The quiet of waiting did not last forever. England, smaller in fleet but swifter in spirit, understood that to face the Armada directly was dangerous. Instead, they turned to cunning. At Calais, where the Armada anchored in neat formation, the English prepared a stratagem that would turn stillness into panic. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how fire itself, gentle in a hearth but wild on water, became the weapon that shifted the story's tide. It was night when the plan took shape. Small English ships, stripped of their valuables, loaded. Instead, with tar, pitch, gunpowder, were set alight and pushed toward the anchored Armada. These fireships, as they were called, glowed like torches against the darkness, drifting silently, then crackling, roaring as flames devoured wood. The wind carried them forward, their sparks scattering in the air, their reflection trembling on the water. On board the Armada, men woke in confusion. Bells clanged, voices shouted, orders flew. To a sailor at anchor, the sight of fire upon water was a nightmare. 4 flames could leap from one ship to another, consuming ropes, sails, masts, anchors. Were cut in haste, sails raised clumsily, ships colliding in the dark as they fled. The fleet that had lain still, orderly, became scattered, broken by fear not of cannon, but of flame. And here lies the gentle twist. Few fireships actually struck the Armada, yet their effect was vast. Panic, not fire, was the true weapon. In scattering to escape, Spain lost its careful formation. The Armada was no longer a wall of ships, but fragments drifting apart. And in those gaps, England found its chance. Stay with me, because here, even amid chaos, beauty remained. Flames glowed against the Black Sea, sparks flew upward like stars, men's faces lit in amber and gold. The fire crackled, the sea hissed, sails billowed with sudden wind. It was fearsome, yes, but also mesmerizing, like watching a storm of light roll across water. Even those who fled could not help but feel awe at the sight. In England, villagers on cliffs saw the glow and gasped. Some thought the Armada itself was burning, collapsing into ruin. Others saw it as a sign that heaven itself had sent fire to scatter Spain. In churches the next morning, thanks were whispered, not for victory yet won, but for hope renewed. For the Armada, dawn revealed the cost. Ships drifted far apart, anchors lost, order broken. Commanders struggled to regroup, to bring unity back, yet the English did not allow them to rest. Swift ships darted in, striking with cannon, retreating before larger galleons could answer. The dance had begun, and the Armada could not find its rhythm again. And here's something tender. Even amid battle, men still thought of home. A sailor loading a cannon might glance at a scrap of cloth tied to his wrist, a gift from a child. A captain barking orders might whisper a prayer for his mother's soul. War did not erase humanity, it magnified it. Each shot, each order, was born from lives beyond the sea. So now, as you breathe gently, imagine the sight: fireships drifting, sails burning, water glowing with reflection. The Armada scatters, voices cry, bells ring, the sea churns with sudden chaos. And then, silence again, as the fire dies and only smoke remains. The fleet is changed, not destroyed, but weakened. England has played its hand with cunning, and Spain must now gather itself for the battles yet to come. In the next chapter, we will follow the Armada as it tries to recover, as cannons speak and the clash of ships fills the air. Morning rose over the channel, with smoke still hanging like gauze upon the horizon. The fireships had burned to embers, their charred remains drifting harmlessly in the swell. Yet their true work was not in the fire they carried, but in the order they had shattered. The Armada, so proud in its formation, so steady in its waiting, now scattered. Ships riding waves apart, anchors lost, commanders calling out across distances that felt far too wide. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how this broken formation became the crack through which the English fleet slipped, turning cunning into courage and silence into cannon. The English ships, lean and nimble, rose like hounds from the hunt. They did not charge directly into the heart of Spain's might. They darted at the edges, cannon flashing, sails snapping taut in the morning wind. Sir Francis Drake and Lord Howard signalled from their decks, urging their captains to strike swiftly and retreat, never to linger too long beneath the shadow of a Spanish galleon's guns. Theirs was not the strength of weight, but of speed, a dance rather than a duel. On board the Armada, confusion reigned. Crews worked desperately to regroup, to reform lines, to raise sails and reload guns. Captains shouted, priests prayed, carpenters hammered. Cannon roared, smoke drifted, men fell. Yet even in chaos, there was resilience. The galleons were strong, their sides thick with timber, their spirit unbroken. They absorbed blows, they answered with thunder, they pressed onward even as they staggered. And here lies the gentle twist. The Armada was not destroyed in that moment, nor even decisively beaten. What the English won that day was not victory, but rhythm. They set the pace of the battle, the dance of strike and slip, approach and retreat. Spain, vast and steady, could not match that rhythm, could not force the fight into its chosen shape. And so, day after day, the Armada fought not only the English, but the tempo itself. Stay with me, because amid cannon fire and cries, life aboard did not vanish into violence. Men still fetched water, still chewed their hard bread, still whispered prayers. The sea remained constant, waves rising and falling, indifferent to gunpowder and steel. Even in the thick of battle, there were moments when a sailor might pause, catch his breath, lift his eyes to the sky and see gulls wheeling calmly, the sun burning pale above. War did not erase the world's beauty. It simply laid it alongside fear. On the English cliffs, villagers watched the smoke drifting offshore, hearing distant thunder like storms at sea. They did not see the details, only shadows of ships, flashes of light, the far-off cries carried by wind. To them it was a mystery, a fearful wonder, a reminder that their fate was being decided just beyond their sight. Some whispered prayers, others wept, children clung to mothers' skirts. The Armada was no longer rumour or distant-sight, it was battle, real and immediate. By evening, both fleets drew apart again, drifting on swells, sails slack in gentler winds. The English had struck, the Spanish had endured, and both sides prepared for the next day. Yet beneath the surface, the balance was shifting. Spain's plan had been to anchor, to gather Parma's soldiers, to cross in strength. Now, the Armada was scattered, harried, kept from its stillness. The sea itself, with English cunning, had conspired to keep them always moving, always reacting, never resting. And here's something tender. For the sailors themselves, victory or defeat was not always clear. A man who loaded cannons all day, his ears ringing, his arms weary, might not know whether his ship had prevailed or faltered. He only knew his own exhaustion, his own hunger, the faces of his comrades. For history is written in strokes of nations, but lived in the breaths of men. So now, as you breathe gently, imagine the sea at dusk. Smoke drifts low, Sails sag, lanterns glow once more on decks. Men lie in hammocks, bodies sore, ears still echoing with thunder. The Armada has not fallen, but it has been shaken, and the English are no longer merely watching, they are shaping. And in the next chapter, we will follow them as the battle stretches across the Channel. A long pursuit that is as much about endurance as about gunpowder. The days that followed were not one single battle, but a series of long dances across the water. The Armada moved eastward along the Channel, seeking to keep to its purpose, while the English harried it relentlessly. Cannon thundered at intervals, smoke rolled across waves, cries rose and fell. Yet through it all, the sea remained wide, the winds uncertain, the outcome undecided. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how this chase across the Channel revealed not only ships and strategy, but the endurance of human spirit. The Armada sailed in crescent formation, its great galleons at the heart, flanked by smaller ships. It was a wall of timber and canvas, steady and proud. But the English, nimble and swift, refused to meet it head-on. Instead, they circled, striking from angles, darting close to fire, then vanishing before Spanish guns could reload. It was not a duel of equals, but of opposites, weight against speed, endurance against agility, solidity against change. On board the English ships, the air filled with the reek of gunpowder, the deck with the pounding of boots. Men hauled cannonballs, rammed powder, lit fuses. Water splashed across decks as fires sparked. Sails snapped as winds shifted suddenly. Captains shouted, flags waved, drums beat. Yet amid it all, there was a strange exhilaration. For though they were fewer, though they faced giants, the English ships found freedom in movement, a joy in the dance of dart and retreat. And here lies the gentle twist. The Armada, though mighty, was not built for pursuit. Its galleons could fire thunderous broadsides, but only if an enemy lingered before them. Against the English, who never lingered, their guns often roared into empty sea. And every missed shot drained powder, every lost moment drained hope. The Armada, once so certain, found itself always answering, never deciding. Stay with me, because even here, in the roar of battle, tenderness lived. A sailor passing powder might pause to smile at a comrade, sharing a glance that said, "We are here, together." A priest might whisper words of comfort over a wounded man, his voice soft against the crash of cannon. Even laughter arose, bitter, brief, but real when a shot went wide, or when a rope tangled comically at the worst moment. Humanity endures, even in war, like a candle flickering in storm. As the chase lengthened, supplies ran low. Spanish men chewed hard bread until their teeth ached, drank water tinged sour with age. Englishmen fared little better, rationing carefully, eating salted meat that left them parched. Hunger and thirst gnawed as sharply as iron, yet both sides endured, for the sea allowed no choice. On the cliffs, English watchers saw smoke drifting for days, a haze that blurred the horizon. They knew their navy was out there, fighting for them, holding the Armada at bay. Some knelt in fields to pray, others kept watch by beacon fires, still others tended to ordinary chores with anxious hearts. The whole land seemed caught between fear and faith, its breath held for news. And here's something tender. Sailors on both sides saw the same stars at night, the same moon shining silver on the sea. Though they were enemies, they shared the same sky, the same salt wind, the same rocking of hammocks. In those quiet hours, Perhaps some wondered if the men across the waves felt the same longing for home, the same prayers whispered into darkness. War divides, but the sea unites in its vast embrace. So now, as you breathe with me, imagine drifting in a small English ship at dusk. The sails are patched, the guns worn, the men weary yet steady. Ahead, the Armada looms still vast, lanterns glowing, sails stretching. Behind, England waits, its cliffs dark on the horizon. You are caught between giants and home, yet you feel not fear but resolve. The dance continues, and in the next chapter, the chase will lead to its fiercest test at Gravelines, where cannon and courage will decide the fleet's fate. The battle that had lingered across the channel now gathered its fiercest breath near a place called Gravelines. For days, the Armada had been pursued, scattered, and harried. Yet it remained proud, unwilling to yield its course. The English fleet, tireless, pressed from behind, pushing the Spaniards toward a narrow strip of coast where shallow waters threatened to catch their heavy galleons. Here, destiny whispered louder, for the sea itself would take a hand in the story. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how the clash at Gravelines became not only a turning of ships, but a turning of the very tide of history. Morning broke grey, the sky heavy with clouds, the wind fresh from the southwest. The Armada had tried to reform, its commanders signalling desperately to restore their crescent formation. But the English pressed in, refusing to allow stillness. Drake and Howard ordered their captains forward, their smaller vessels darting close, firing broadsides, then veering away before Spain's guns could answer. The sea rang with thunder, smoke rolled across the waves, and cries of men carried on the wind. On board a Spanish galleon, the deck shook with each cannon's recoil. Men hauled ropes, passed powder, dragged the wounded to the surgeon's corner. A priest raised a crucifix above the din, his voice calling for faith, his eyes lifted heavenward. Timber splintered, sails tore, yet the ship pressed forward, unwilling to yield. For these men, to falter was not only failure, was sacrilege. They believed themselves chosen for holy duty, and each cannonball was answered with prayer as much as with powder. And here lies the gentle twist. The Armada's strength, its size. Its weight became its weakness at grave. The galleons, magnificent in open sea, found themselves trapped in tighter waters. Shallows loomed beneath, winds pressed them against sandbanks, English fire raked them from all sides. They could not move swiftly, could not turn easily. The very sea that had carried them north now hemmed them in, a quiet conspirator against their cause. Stay with me, 'cause even amid chaos there were tender moments. A sailor passed his water flask to a wounded comrade, whispering comfort. A captain placed his cloak over a boy trembling with fear. In the surgeon's corner, where lanterns swayed, men gritted teeth as wounds were bound, hands squeezed in silent reassurance. Humanity flickered like candlelight in the storm, fragile yet enduring. The English, too, felt strain. Powder ran low, sails tore, men grew weary from endless hours at the guns. Yet their ships danced still, light on the water, striking, slipping away, striking again. For them, victory lay not in destroying the Armada outright, but in wearing it down, breaking its spirit, denying it rest. Theirs was the art of persistence, the strength of the small against the great dot. As the battle stretched through the day, the sea itself turned violent. Winds rose, waves heaved, rain lashed. The Armada, already battered, now fought not only men but storm. Ships drifted perilously close to sandbanks, anchors lost, masts broken. Lanterns flickered, sails snapped, timbers groaned. It was no longer battle alone, but survival. And here's something tender. Many later, said the sea, more than cannon, defeated the Armada. That God's breath, carried on the wind, turned the tide. For the sailors who lived it, the truth was simpler. They endured because they must, because every breath was a step toward another dawn. Whether in prayer or labor, whether clinging to faith or to rope, each man carried forward by nightfall. The Armada was shattered, though not destroyed. Many ships limped northward, scattered, broken, their commanders struggling to regroup. The English, too weary and battered, did not chase recklessly, for they knew the danger of shallow waters and storms. The sea grew dark, smoke drifted into night, lanterns glowed faintly, and silence slowly returned. So now as you breathe gently, imagine the sea at gravelines. Waves heave, smoke drifts, lanterns sway, men lie exhausted on damp decks. The storm has passed for now, but the journey is not ended. The Armada, wounded, turns north, seeking safety. England watches, weary but unbroken. And in the next chapter, we will follow the Armada into the North Sea, where hunger, storm, and distance weigh heavier than any cannonball. The Armada, battered at gravelines, now drifted northward. It had failed to meet Palmer soldiers, failed to anchor and cross the channel, failed to bring England to its knees. Yet it was not annihilated. Its hulls still floated, its men still lived, and its commanders still prayed for mercy and direction. To retreat was not shame, but necessity. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how the Armada's long retreat north became not only a test of seamanship, but of the human will to endure. The fleet turned toward the North Sea, sails ragged, masts splintered, decks slick with rain. The English followed at a distance, cautious not to press too close. For all its wounds, the Armada was still formidable, its guns still heavy. And so the English shadowed rather than attacked, content to let hunger and storm fight on their side. On board, men felt the slow weight of despair. Bread had grown mouldy, water sour, meat bellies cramped with hunger, lips cracked with thirst, fevers spread through cramped hammocks. Yet they labored, still hauling ropes, patching sails, bailing water. The will to live carried them forward, even when hope faltered. And here lies the gentle twist. Retreat was not safety. To sail north meant venturing into colder seas, into harsher storms, into waters unfamiliar to many. The Armada had set out to conquer. Now it struggled to survive. Each dawn brought not victory, but another day of labor, of hunger, of holding fast against the sea's relentless hand. Stay with me because, even here, in hardship, beauty remained. Dawn lit the horizon in pale gold, gulls wheeled above, dolphins swam alongside, their sleek bodies rising from waves as if to guide the ships. At night, stars glittered across the heavens, vast and silent. Men leaned on rails, their hearts heavy, yet their eyes wide with wonder. Even in retreat, the world offered solace, quiet reminders of grace. As the Armada rounded Scotland, storms struck again. Winds howled, rain poured, waves towered. Ships broke apart on hidden rocks, splintering into pieces. Men clung to wreckage, prayed in darkness, whispered names of loved ones as the sea claimed them. Others survived, dragged ashore onto cold foreign coasts, shivering but alive. For every ship lost, another carried on, pressing forward. seeking home, and here's something tender. In Ireland, some survivors washed ashore, only to meet violence from fearful locals. Others were sheltered, given bread and blankets by hands that pitied their suffering. The sea divided men, but humanity sometimes bridged the gap, even between enemies. For those who reached Spain again, the return was quiet, somber. Families wept with relief to see sons alive, yet wept also for those who did not return. The Armada had set out as a symbol of might, but returned as a reminder of fragility. Kings and captains spoke of lessons, of faith, of destiny. But the sailors themselves carried simpler memories: hunger, storm, kindness, loss. So now, as you breathe slowly, imagine a Spanish galleon limping home. Its sails are torn, its timbers scarred, its men weary but alive. They lean on rails, watching the familiar coastline rise from the sea. Behind them lies failure, ahead of them lies rest. The Armada's story is not ended, but its course is forever changed. And in the next chapter, we will look not only at Spain, but at England, at how this great storm altered both nations, shaping their futures in ways gentle and profound. The battered remains of the Armada returned slowly, almost reluctantly, to Spain. Harbours that had once cheered the departure now grew silent as torn sails and scarred hulls limped home. The people who gathered along the quays saw not triumph, but exhaustion. Not banners of victory, but wood blackened by smoke, decks hollow with loss. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how Spain, though mighty, was forced to look into a mirror of humility, and how even defeat carried whispers of endurance. Imagine the harbour of Corunna. A grey dawn spreads over the water. Fishermen pause in their work to stare at the silhouettes approaching. The first ships to return are barely seaworthy. Ropes hang limp, masts cracked, paint scorched from cannon fire. The men aboard stumble ashore, some kissing the ground, others weeping openly. Mothers, wives, children press forward, searching for faces, crying out names. There is joy when loved ones return, but the absences speak louder. For each man embraced, another is mourned. Philip II, Spain's king, receives word of the Armada's failure with a calm face, though sorrow lies behind his eyes. He is told of storms, of fire ships, of scattered fleets and shattered plans. He listens, nods, folds hands, and says quietly, "I sent my ships against men, not against the wind and the waves." In those words lies the truth. Spain's strength met not only England's cunning, but the sea's unyielding hand, and here lies the gentle twist. Though Spain had lost, it did not collapse. Its empire stretched across oceans, its wealth flowed from the Americas, its armies still marched on land. The Armada was a wound, but not a death. For many in Spain, life continued, fields tilled, markets opened, bells rang in churches. The fleet's return was a sorrow, yes, but the world did not end. History rarely ends in thunder. It bends, it shifts, it sighs. Stay with me because, even in defeat, beauty endured. Survivors told stories of storms lit by lightning, of stars burning over northern seas, of kindness found on foreign shores. They spoke of comrades lost, but also of courage shared. Around hearths in Spain, children listened wide-eyed, hearing tales not of victory, but of survival. For sometimes, survival itself is a triumph in the countryside. Peasants heard rumors of what had happened far away, yet their lives remained tied to soil and season. They harvested olives, pressed grapes, baked bread. The Armada was a storm in their nation, but daily life was a river that kept flowing. Spain's strength lay not only in kings or fleets, but in its people's quiet persistence. And here's something tender. Some who returned from the Armada never spoke much of it again. They carried their memories silently, as though the sea had stolen their words. Others spoke often, needing to release the weight they bore. But whether in silence or in story, they lived on, carrying the Armada's shadow into old age. So now, as you breathe with me, imagine a Spanish village at twilight. The fields lie quiet, smoke curls from chimneys, a church bell tolls softly. In one house, a sailor sits by the fire, his hands scarred, his eyes distant. His children sit at his feet, listening as he speaks slowly of storms, of battles, of the long road home. His voice is low, his words careful, yet in them is the heart of endurance. Spain has lost, but it has not fallen. And in the next chapter, we will cross the sea once more to England, where victory was met not with arrogance, but with relief, with thanksgiving, and with the tender awareness that survival is a gift as fragile as breath. While Spain faced sorrow, England awoke to relief. For weeks, the beacons had burned, the bells had rung, the nation had prayed. Now, word spread that the Armada had scattered, that its great plan had faltered, that England had been spared. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how England's joy was not loud triumph, but soft thanksgiving, a deep breath after long fear in London. Crowds gathered in streets, churches filled with voices singing psalms. Elizabeth's courtiers spread the news quickly. The Armada had retreated north, its plans undone. There was cheering, yes, but also quiet tears of relief. Mothers embraced children, men clasped hands, neighbors exchanged words of thanksgiving. For them, this was not a story of conquest, but of survival. Elizabeth herself appeared in public, calm and radiant. She spoke not of pride, but of gratitude, reminding her people that it was their unity, their courage, and their faith that had seen them through. In one of her most remembered appearances, she rode among her troops at Tilbury, dressed in armor, her voice carrying across the field, "I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Those words, soft yet strong, lingered in memory, a promise that the crown and the people were bound together, and here lies the gentle twist. Though England rejoiced, it did not forget its fragility. Its fleet was smaller, its resources fewer. Its survival owed much to weather as to skill. The Armada's failure was a gift, not a guarantee. And so thanksgiving was mingled with humility. Victory, they understood, is never certain, never final. Stay with me because, even in triumph, daily life remained. Markets bustled, bakers kneaded dough, children played in lanes. The Armada became a tale told in taverns, a memory carried in song, a subject of prayer in churches. Yet the people still sowed fields, still fetched water, still lived their quiet lives. Victory did not lift them out of ordinary days, settled into them like a gentle warmth in parishes across the land. Services of thanksgiving were held. Candles flickered, hymns rose, incense curled. The people bowed heads, not only in joy, but in recognition of how near fear had been. Some thanked God for the storms that scattered the Armada, others for the courage of their sailors, others simply for another sunrise. Each prayer was personal, each gratitude unique, yet all bound together in a chorus of relief. And here's something tender. for many English families. The Armada became less about kings and queens than about their own memories. A child remembered watching beacons blaze on the hill. A fisherman remembered hearing distant cannon thunder. A mother remembered kneeling by her bed, whispering prayers into the night. These private moments became the true legacy of the Armada, woven into the fabric of countless lives. So now, as you breathe gently, imagine standing in a small English church at dusk. The stone walls glow in candlelight, voices rise in hymn, the air thick with incense and prayer. Outside, the land is quiet, the threat has passed, the night is safe. The Armada is gone, England endures, and hearts are lifted with gratitude. And in the next chapter, we will linger in that quiet aftermath, tracing how memory itself carries stories forward, how the Armada became less a battle of ships, and more a legend of resilience, whispered from one generation to the next. The Armada had passed, yet its echoes lingered. Across England, relief settled into story, and story soon became legend. What had been terror in the moment turned into memory afterward, softened by time, embroidered by voices, reshaped to bring comfort and meaning. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how the Armada, though defeated, lived on as a tale retold, not just in courts and chronicles, but in cottages and hearths. Imagine an autumn evening in 1588. The harvest is nearly gathered, the air cool, the smell of wood smoke drifting through village lanes. Families gather in their homes, shutters closed, candles flickering. At the table, bread is shared, cider poured, children drowsy after long days in the fields. Someone begins to speak of the Armada, of how the beacons lit the hills, how the Queen rode among her soldiers, how storms rose and scattered the mighty fleet. The words carry softly, almost like a lullaby, as listeners lean closer. Fear has passed, but the memory has become a bond, something that unites those who lived through it. In taverns, the Armada is spoken of more boldly. Sailors describe battles in the Channel, tankards raised in pride. Some exaggerate, turning smoke and cannon into grand victories, though those who were there know the truth was grittier, more weary. But the embellishments matter less than the comfort they bring. The Armada becomes a symbol, something to cling to, a reminder that England had faced a great storm and endured. And here lies the gentle twist. Legends are not only born from victory, but from vulnerability. The Armada was remembered not just as a defeat for Spain, but as a narrow escape for England. The people knew how close danger had been, how fragile safety felt. In telling the story, they gave themselves reassurance, turning fear into pride, uncertainty into faith. Stay with me, 'cause memory does not remain still. It drifts, like the tide, reshaping with each telling. Chroniclers in London wrote of strategies and commanders, of Elizabeth's courage, of divine providence. Villagers in Devon or Norfolk spoke of beacons on their hills, of fishermen who had seen strange sails on the horizon. Each retelling added another thread, weaving a tapestry of memory that stretched across the land. For the children who grew up hearing these tales, the Armada became less an event and more a myth, something vast and half-dreamed. They imagined galleons like castles, storms summoned by heaven, queens radiant as stars. Their parents smiled, letting the stories grow larger, for that was the nature of memory. What had been hardship in the living became wonder in the telling. And here's something tender. Songs emerged, ballads sung by traveling musicians. The melodies were gentle, the words simple, easy to carry from village to village. God blew with his wind, and they were scattered, the singers said, their voices rising under timbered roofs. The people listened, nodded, sang along. The Armada became not just history, but music, woven into the rhythm of everyday life by the year's end. When winter closed in and snow touched the hedgerows, the Armada already felt like something distant. Its fear had faded, replaced by gratitude, by pride, by a sense of unity that lingered like the warmth of a fire after flame. And yet, beneath the pride, there was always a trace of humility. The English knew the storms had fought for them, that luck had walked beside them. In that knowledge, their joy became gentler, more lasting. So now, as you breathe deeply, imagine a small cottage in winter. A family sits close to the fire, a father retelling how the Armada sailed and how it failed. His children listen wide-eyed, their imaginations filling with ships and storms. Outside, snow falls softly, muffling the world. Inside, the story binds them together, turning history into comfort. And in the next chapter, we will cross the sea once more to Spain, where memory shaped itself differently, where sorrow was born with dignity, and where the Armada's loss was carried not as legend, but as quiet endurance. In Spain, the story of the Armada was told in different tones. Where England spoke of thanksgiving and legend, Spain spoke of sorrow, of resilience, of faith tested but not broken. Ships had not returned, sons and brothers were lost, yet life continued. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how Spain's memory was not of defeat alone, but of survival, and of trust that tomorrow would bring another tide. Imagine the harbour of Seville months after the Armada's return. The river glints with late sun. Merchants call out prices in the marketplace, yet the docks bear an emptiness. Ships that should have filled the quay are missing, their absence as loud as bells. Families stand at water's edge, remembering faces that will not return, names that will not be called. Yet life around them carries on. Bread is baked, bells toll for mass, children chase each other in narrow lanes. Grief is folded into the rhythm of daily life, never absent, never overwhelming. Philip II, in his palace, kneels in his private chapel. Candles burn before gilded saints. Incense drifts upward. His lips murmur prayers. Reports of the Armada's lost weigh on him, but he does not cry aloud. Instead, he bows his head, believing that God's will had spoken through storm and sea. For him, the Armada was not a failure, but a test of faith, one endured with dignity. And here lies the gentle twist. Spain remained strong. Its empire stretched across oceans. Silver flowed from the New World. Soldiers marched in Flanders and Italy. The Armada's loss was a sorrow, yes, but not the end. To the people of Spain, grief became resilience. Silence became strength. The world looked on and saw defeat. Spain looked inward and saw endurance. Stay with me, because amid sorrow, tenderness bloomed. Survivors told stories not of glory, but of kindness. They remembered comrades who shared food, who prayed together, who comforted the dying. They spoke of foreign shores where strangers gave bread or shelter. They spoke, too, of storms where men clung to each other, holding fast against the waves. These quiet moments became their own kind of legend, less sung, but no less true. In villages far from the sea, news of the Armada reached slowly. Farmers heard whispers in markets. Priests spoke of it in sermons. Yet their daily lives ploughing, sowing, harvesting anchored them. The Armada was sorrow at a distance, softened by the steady rhythm of the seasons. The land endured, and so did its people. And here's something tender in convents and monasteries. Prayers were said daily for the souls lost at sea. Nuns lit candles, monks chanted psalms, bells tolled softly in cloisters. In these sacred spaces, the Armada became less a matter of politics and more of compassion, of remembrance, of care for those who had vanished into waves. As years passed, Spain spoke less of the Armada. Its story folded into silence, remembered more in private grief than public song. Yet the endurance of the people, the faith of the king, the resilience of villages and families, these lived on. The Armada had not destroyed Spain. It had revealed its strength, its ability to carry loss with grace. So now, as you breathe gently, imagine a Spanish village at sunset. The fields glow gold, children's laughter drifts on the breeze, bells toll softly from the church. In one home, a widow sets bread on the table, her children gathered close. She says a prayer, her voice low, her eyes steady. Loss sits with her, but so does love, so does hope. Spain breathes on, its heart unbroken. And in the next chapter, we will step back, looking not only at England or Spain, but at the larger world, that how the Armada shifted the balance of Europe, and how ripples from this storm touched lands far beyond the Channel. The year after the Armada, Europe breathed differently. Though the great clash had taken place between Spain and England, its echoes rolled across kingdoms, duchies, and distant courts. The balance of power had shifted, though softly, like a weight moved from one side of a table to another. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how the Armada's ripples reached beyond the Channel, touching allies, rivals, and even distant seas in the Netherlands, where rebellion against Spanish rule had long burned. The Armada's failure was cause for quiet hope. Dutch towns, once fearful of Spanish reinforcements, felt a little safer. In taverns along the canals of Amsterdam, merchants spoke of how the storm had scattered Spain's power. In churches, ministers gave thanks, their voices carrying through vaulted spaces, their congregations listening with cautious relief. The sea, their ally as much as England's, had kept the tide of Spain from crossing in France, a land torn by its own religious wars. The Armada's story was heard with mixed hearts. Catholic nobles grieved Spain's loss, seeing in it a setback for their faith. Protestants, meanwhile, saw it as proof that heaven favored their cause. Yet most of all, the French saw opportunity. With Spain weakened, perhaps they could tilt the balance in their own favor. Politics is like the sea, always shifting, always restless, and here lies the gentle twist. The Armada, though remembered as a single great event, did not end with its scattering. Its memory became a tool, a lesson, a symbol used by others. In Germany, pamphlets were printed, carrying tales of God's judgment upon Spain. In Italy, scholars debated what the defeat meant for Europe's future. Even in the far reaches of the Mediterranean, whispers spread. The ocean beyond Spain's strength had spoken. Stay with me, 'cause the ripples did not stop with politics. They reached into trade, into exploration, into the ambitions of empires. With Spain's fleet weakened, English privateers sailed bolder. Dutch merchants expanded routes, French adventurers tested waters once held firmly by Iberian might. The sea lanes, once dominated, now felt more open, more contested, more alive with possibility. And here's something tender for the common people of Europe. The Armada was not always a matter of strategy. It was a story of awe, of how a fleet so mighty could be humbled, how storms could scatter kings' ambitions, how fragile ships and men remained before the sea, in cottages and villages far from the channel. The story was told like a parable, a reminder that no power, however great, is beyond the reach of nature. In Spain itself, envoys carried messages to allies, explaining, excusing, reshaping the tale. They spoke of storms, of providence, of endurance despite hardship. Pride softened the wound, faith steadied the hand. Yet even in their words, the truth flickered through. The Armada had been broken, and Spain would need time to heal. As months turned to years, the Armada's ripples continued. England grew bolder on the seas, its sailors venturing farther, its merchants richer, its sense of destiny swelling quietly. Spain, though still vast in empire, began to feel the strain of endless wars, of silver flowing out as quickly as it arrived, of fleets stretched to thin. The balance of Europe was not transformed in a day, but nudged, tilted, set upon a new course. So now, as you breathe slowly, imagine the map of Europe in 1589. Cities glow with candlelight, rivers glint under moon, ships lie at anchor in countless harbors. Each place tells its own story, yet all are touched by the Armada's shadow. The storm has passed, but its ripples move outward still, quiet but enduring, and in the next chapter we will follow those ripples even farther, across oceans to the New World, where Spain's treasure fleets sailed, and where the Armada's memory shaped the dreams of distant lands. Beyond Europe, the sea stretched vast, carrying ships, hopes, and stories across oceans. The Armada's failure in the Channel shaped not only kingdoms close at hand, but distant lands bound by trade, empire, and faith. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how even across the Atlantic, whispers of the Armada reached, changing dreams of the New World. Spain's empire in the Americas had long been the envy of Europe. Silver flowed from Potosi, gold from New Granada, sugar from the Caribbean. Treasure fleets crossed the Atlantic, guarded by warships, feeding Spain's wealth and wars. The Armada's failure, however, showed that these fleets were not invincible. English privateers, emboldened by the memory of 1588, struck bolder, raiding Spanish convoys, slipping into harbors, capturing ships heavy with silver. Each raid was small compared to the Armada, yet each whispered that Spain's hold on the seas could be challenged. In English taverns, sailors told stories of Drake, of Hawkins, of ships venturing westward, daring Spanish wrath. Children listened with wide eyes, imagining distant islands, glittering treasure, fierce storms. The Armada had made heroes of these men, and now their names became songs, their ventures tales of destiny. The idea of England as a seafaring nation, chosen to explore and expand, began to grow in hearts and minds. And here lies the gentle twist. The Armada's defeat did not end Spain's empire, but it planted seeds of change. Other nations, seeing Spain humbled, dared to dream of colonies, of trade, of wealth across the seas. The Dutch would follow, the French too, each testing waters Spain had once claimed as its own. The ocean, vast and open, invited new players into its story. Stay with me, because, in the New World itself, the Armada's echoes were felt differently. In Mexico City, in Lima, in Havana, the news arrived months late, carried by ships across the Atlantic. Spaniards their bowed heads, prayed for the souls lost, yet continued their lives. Markets bustled, mines dug deep, plantations turned sugar into wealth. The empire endured, yet whispers of vulnerability touched even these distant shores. For indigenous peoples, who lived under Spanish rule, the Armada was a far-off tale, yet its meaning seeped through. If Spain could falter, perhaps its power was not endless. If storms could scatter its fleets, perhaps the world was not fixed forever. History shifts not only through battles, but through the quiet knowledge that change is possible. And here's something tender in the Caribbean. Sailors of many nations crossed paths, Spaniards. English, French, Dutch. Sometimes they fought, but sometimes they traded stories, shared food, even sang together under the same stars. The sea, which divided empires, also united men in its vastness. The Armada's memory was part of these conversations, a reminder of both danger and wonder. As the century wore on, the Armada remained a turning point. Spain still rich, still vast, yet slower, wearier, stretched thin. England still small, still fragile, yet bolder, more confident, dreaming of horizons far beyond its shores. The seeds planted by that stormy summer of 1588 would grow into forests of ships, colonies, and rivalries that reshaped the world. So now, as you breathe gently, imagine the wide Atlantic under stars. A Spanish treasure fleet sails slow and heavy, lanterns glowing on dark water. Somewhere nearby, an English privateer waits, sails furled, crew whispering. The ocean is vast, the night endless, and the story still unfolding. The Armada is gone, but its echoes sail on. And in the next chapter, we will return to the people themselves, the sailors, soldiers, and families who lived through the Armada, lingering in their memories, their letters, their prayers, to hear how individuals carried history in their hearts. History is often told through kings, commanders, and fleets, but beneath banners and cannons lived countless ordinary lives. The Armada was not only a clash of empires, but a chorus of individual voices, sailors hauling ropes, women waiting at windows, children listening to prayers whispered at night. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how the Armada endured, not only in chronicles, but in letters, in memories, in the quiet pulse of family life. Imagine a sailor from Andalusia, returning after months at sea. His ship is battered, his clothes ragged, but his heart is lifted as he steps onto familiar soil. He carries with him not treasure, not victory, but survival. In his pocket, he keeps a small wooden cross, worn smooth from the touch of his hands during storms. When he reaches his village, his family surrounds him, pressing close, touching him as if to be sure he is real. That cross, passed to his son, becomes an heirloom, its meaning not power, but endurance. In England, a fisherman tells his grandchildren of the summer when the beacons burned. He remembers standing on the cliffside, the night sky glowing red as fire spread from hill to hill, warning of the Armada's approach. His voice is steady, but his eyes glisten. The children listen, wide-eyed, imagining the sea filled with vast, ghostly ships. For them, the story is less fear and more wonder, softened by time, and here lies the gentle twist. History is kept alive, less by kings than by kitchens, less by battles than by firesides. The Armada's memory endured not only in speeches or chronicles, but in lullabies, in letters tucked into drawers, in the way silence fell when a name was spoken at supper. Stay with me, because, if you lean closer, you can almost hear those letters. A mother in Lisbon writes to her husband, a carpenter aboard one of the galleons, "The children miss you. Every evening we pray for your safe return. I place bread by the window, as though you might come in at any hour." A soldier in England writes to his brother, "The Queen spoke to us with fire in her eyes. I have never seen a woman so full of courage. Whatever comes, I will stand." These voices, fragile and fleeting, are the truest echoes of the Armada in monasteries. Monks recorded names of the lost, writing them carefully in ledgers, candles glowing on their pages. They wrote not of politics, but of souls, commending each to God's keeping. In villages, widows lit candles each evening, setting them by windows as though their flames could guide the departed home. Children, too young to understand, carried memories of mother's tears, of father's absence, of whispered prayers in the night. And here's something tender. Many sailors carried songs. On Spanish decks, men sang to keep time at the oars, their voices rising against the wind. On English ships, men sang ballads of home, verses of Devon lanes, of London taverns, of sweethearts waiting. Those songs, remembered and sung long after the battle, kept the Armada alive in melody. History drifts away, but song lingers. By the time years had passed, those who lived through the Armada grew older. Some carried silence, others told stories often. Children became parents, grandchildren grew. Yet the tale endured, shaped not by what was written in chronicles, but by what was spoken in kitchens, whispered at night, remembered in small keepsakes. So now, as you breathe deeply, imagine a grandmother sitting in a wooden chair by the fire. Around her, children gather close, shadows flickering on the walls. She speaks of the summer, of the Armada, of beacons, of storms, of prayers. Her voice is low, steady, carrying not triumph or sorrow, but the calm wisdom of memory. The Armada has become not only history, but family, and in the next chapter, we will step back once more, to see how the Armada lingered not just in personal memory, but in the imagination of nations, shaping identity, legend, and the sense of who people believed themselves to be. The Armada's story did not end with its ships or its sailors. It lived on in the imagination of nations. England and Spain both carried its memory, shaping it into legend, weaving it into identity. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how history became myth, how memory became destiny, and how a single summer shaped centuries to follow. In England, the Armada became a symbol of divine favor. Pamphlets and sermons told of how God had blown with his wind, scattering the mighty fleet. Artists painted Elizabeth as a radiant queen, standing tall against the storm. Poets wrote verses praising the courage of sailors, the unity of the people, the providence that had preserved the realm. The Armada became more than battle, it became proof that England was chosen, blessed, destined for greatness on the seas. In Spain, the story was softened. Chroniclers wrote of storms more than of defeats, of endurance more than of failure. The Armada became a lesson in humility, a reminder of the sea's power, of God's will, of the fragility of human ambition. Its story was not sung as loudly as in England, but it lingered nonetheless, a quiet shadow in the corridors of power. A memory born with dignity, and here lies the gentle twist. The Armada's true history was complex, filled with weariness, hunger, faith, and storms. But memory rarely seeks complexity. Nations prefer clarity, symbols, meaning. England remembered triumph, Spain remembered endurance, Both carried truths, but neither carried the whole. The Armada became less a moment of history, more a mirror for identity. Stay with me because, as generations passed, the Armada was remembered less by those who lived it and more by those who imagined it. In England, children learned of it as a glorious victory, their hearts swelling with pride. In Spain, it faded into quieter tones, remembered by scholars, monks, and families more than by banners or ballads. Memory shifted with time, as soft and steady as tides reshaping a shore. The Armada also lingered in art, in tapestries, vast battles unfurled across woven seas. In engravings, ships bristling with cannon-faced storms painted with divine light. In poems, the sea itself was given voice, speaking as judge of kings and empires. Art turned history into vision, into something that endured long after sails rotted and timbers sank. And here's something tender in both nations. The Armada became a story of prayer. In England, churches remembered it as a day of deliverance. In Spain, masses were said for the souls lost. Across both lands, candles burned, incense rose, hymns echoed. The Armada, once thunder and fire, became light and song, woven into the sacred rhythms of faith. By the time a century had passed, the Armada was legend. England saw it as the beginning of its destiny as a naval power. Spain saw it as a moment of testing, endured with patience. Other nations remembered it as a parable that no fleet is too great, no plan too mighty, to withstand the sea. History had softened, myth had grown. So now, as you breathe gently, imagine walking through a gallery centuries later. Paintings of ships line the walls, tapestries glow with threads of sea and storm, books whisper of kings and queens. Yet beneath it all lies the truth men hauling ropes, women waiting at windows, prayers whispered in the night. The Armada endures, not only as history, but as memory, as identity, as legend. And in the final chapter, we will bring it all together, sailing softly to the end of our journey, letting the Armada drift into silence, into sleep, into the gentle assurance that history, like the sea, moves endlessly but never in haste. The story of the Armada began with whispers of ambition, with plans written by candlelight in chambers of stone. It swelled into a fleet, 100 ships rising from shipyards, sails stitched by countless hands, hopes raised in prayers and promises. It crossed seas, clashed with storms and fire, scattered across the channel, drifted into the north, and limped home again. It was thunder and silence, loss and survival, pride and humility. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see how the Armada's story, though centuries past, still lingers not as noise, but as a quiet presence, like the tide that never rests. Imagine again the coasts of Spain in 1588. Families gathered at harbours, scanning the horizon, waiting for sails. Some ships returned, battered and weary. Others never came. The sound of weeping mingled with the murmur of markets, the toll of church bells. In those moments, Spain carried grief but also endurance. It did not fall, though wounded. Its people bent but did not break. Now imagine England in that same year, beacons blazing on hills, bells ringing in parishes, Elizabeth speaking to her soldiers with words that would live forever. Relief washed over the land as the Armada retreated, as storms rose to finish what cannon could not. England gave thanks, not in arrogance, but in humility, aware of how narrow the escape had been, and here lies the gentle twist. The Armada was never a simple story of victory or defeat. It was a story of humanity, of sailors praying on wet decks, of mothers waiting in silence, of kings kneeling in chapels, of storms sweeping across seas with no heed of crowns. History, when seen closely, is less about battles than about breaths, less about fleets than about faces. Stay with me, B, because the Armada's story did not vanish when sails disappeared over the horizon. It lived on in the memories of those who survived, in the songs of sailors, in the prayers of widows, in the lessons whispered to children by firesides. It lived on in England as legend, as proof of destiny, as a spark for dreams of empire. It lived on in Spain as sorrow born with dignity, as a reminder of humility, as a thread in the tapestry of endurance. As centuries passed, the Armada softened into myth. Paintings, poems, sermons, ballads all shaped its memory. Yet beneath the layers of art and symbol, the truth remained. Men endured hunger and storms. Women carried grief. Children grew in the shadow of memory. The Armada was not only history, it was life lived, breath by breath. And here's something tender. The sea still remembers. Along the coasts of Ireland and Scotland, wrecks lie beneath the waves, timbers resting on sand, anchors buried in silence. Fish swim through them, weeds sway gently, light filters down in rippling gold. The ships that once carried ambition now rest in peace, part of the ocean's quiet kingdom. If you listen to the waves on those shores, you might almost hear the echo of voices, the creak of timbers, the whisper of prayers. The Armada, in the end, belongs not only to Spain or to England, but to the world. It is a reminder that storms can scatter the mighty, that endurance lies in ordinary hands, that history is written not only in victories, but in resilience. It is a story of human fragility and human strength, bound together like sail and mast, like tide and shore. So now, as you breathe deeply, imagine standing at the edge of a quiet sea. The horizon is calm, the waves gentle, the air cool with salt. The sun sinks low, painting the water in soft gold. Behind you lies the long story, the plans, the fleet, the storms, the prayers. Before you lies only rest, only silence, only the endless sea stretching into night. Let the Armada drift away now, like ships fading into mist. Let its echoes soften, its sails vanish, its thunder dissolve into the hush of waves. What remains is calm, safe, unhurried. You are here, in this moment, listening, breathing, resting. History is vast, but tonight it is gentle, and it carries you toward sleep as steadily as a tide carries driftwood toward the shore. And as your eyes grow heavier, remember, stories like seas are endless. The Armada is one wave in the ocean of time. More stories wait, more nights of whispered history, more journeys told softly in the dark. When you are ready, you may drift into them, carried by the same calm voice, the same steady tide. For now, though rest. Let this story end as all good stories should, with quiet, with warmth, with gratitude. Thank you for listening, for walking this long shoreline of memory with me. May your dreams be gentle, your night untroubled, your heart at ease. When you wake, more stories will be waiting, ready to carry you again into the calm seas of history. Until then, good night.